A tired single mom finishes her late shift. A charming stranger steps from the shadows, saves her, comforts her, wins her trust. But the smiles fade. He isn't a hero. He's a predator who hunts women he thinks are weak. Then everything flips. The helpless mom pulls out a badge. She's FBI, and she's been watching him all along. But now he knows her secret. And when he takes the one thing she loves most, the battle becomes personal. How far will a mother and an agent go when her child's life is on the line? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Clara wiped down the last table at Joe's Diner, her movements slow but methodical after the long evening shift. The familiar scent of coffee and apple pie lingered in the air as the fluorescent lights hummed quietly overhead. Her feet ached in her worn waitress shoes, but the weight of the tips in her apron pocket made the discomfort worth it. "Thanks for the extra coffee, Clara," said Earl, one of her regular customers, as he adjusted his trucker cap and stood up from his usual booth. "You always know when I need a refill before I do." Clara smiled warmly. "After 3 years of serving you dinner, I should hope so. Drive safe, Earl." The bell above the door chimed as Earl left, leaving only Mrs. Peterson, another regular, finishing her usual Turkey Club sandwich. The elderly woman had been coming in every Thursday night since Clara started working at the diner. "How's Danny doing in school?" Mrs. Peterson asked, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. "Still getting those good grades?" "Straight A's this quarter," Clara replied, pride evident in her voice. "Though I wish he'd spend a little less time with those video games and more time outside." Mrs. Peterson chuckled. "Boys will be boys. You're doing a wonderful job with him, dear." Clara's heart warmed at the kind words, even as a familiar ache tugged at her chest. She reached for her wallet in her apron pocket, pulling out a worn photograph that was slightly creased at the corners. Tom's smiling face looked back at her, his police uniform crisp and neat, his eyes bright with life. The photo had been taken just 2 weeks before the drunk driver had taken him away from them. She ran her thumb gently over the image. "I hope so," she whispered. The quiet moment was interrupted by the clattering of dishes from the kitchen. "Hey, Clara, you mind helping me with these last few pans?" called Marco, the dishwasher. "Be right there." Clara tucked the photo back into her wallet and headed to the kitchen. The industrial dishwasher hummed as she and Marco worked together to clean the remaining cookware. "My sister's having a barbecue this Sunday," Marco mentioned as they worked. "You and Danny should come. There'll be lots of kids his age there." Clara smiled appreciatively. "That's sweet of you, Marco, but I picked up an extra shift." "Single mom? You know how it is." She tried to keep her tone light, but the weight of constant financial pressure was never far from her mind. After finishing in the kitchen, Clara returned to the dining area. Mrs. Peterson had left, leaving her usual generous tip and a small note that read, "God bless you and Danny." Clara tucked both into her apron pocket, touched by the gesture. The empty diner felt different at night. During the day, it was full of life, the chatter of customers, the sizzle of the grill, the constant movement of servers and cooks. But now, in the quiet hours, Clara could feel the loneliness creeping in. The scattered empty chairs and booths seemed to emphasize the vacant spaces in her life. She began her closing routine, counting the register and preparing the day's receipts. The familiar tasks helped keep her mind occupied, preventing it from wandering to darker thoughts about bills to pay and the constant juggling act of being both mother and father to Danny. "Lord," she whispered as she worked, "I know you have a plan. Some days, it's just harder to see it than others." The ceiling fans whirred softly overhead as Clara gathered her things. She pulled on her worn jean jacket, the nights were getting cooler, and checked her phone. A text from Mrs. Martinez, their elderly neighbor who watched Danny when Clara worked late. "Danny's finished his homework and is sleeping. Take your time." Clara smiled, grateful for the small blessings of good neighbors and a responsible son. She gathered the day's garbage bags and headed toward the back door, then paused, remembering she'd forgotten to wipe down the coffee station. Turning back, she quickly cleaned the counter, her movements automatic after years of practice. The wall clock showed 11:45 p.m. as she finally finished her closing duties. Clara pulled out her keys. the metal warm from being in her pocket all evening. The familiar weight of them in her hand was somehow comforting, a small symbol of responsibility and trust. Just as she reached for the light switch, a tap at the front door made her jump. Through the glass, she could see a man she didn't recognize, wearing a neat business suit that seemed out of place at this hour. He smiled apologetically and raised his hand in a friendly wave. Clara hesitated, her hand still on the light switch. The man's smile remained steady, warm, and he gestured to the closed sign, then made a walking motion with his fingers, pointing toward the parking lot. She should have felt nervous perhaps, but something about his appearance, the well-fitted suit, the carefully combed hair, the professional demeanor, put her at ease. He looked like he'd just stepped out of an office meeting, despite the late hour. Moving to the door, Clara unlocked it but kept the security chain in place. "I'm sorry, we're closed for the night," she said through the gap. "Oh, I know," the man replied, his voice smooth and apologetic. "I'm Victor Hale. I noticed you were about to head out. And, well," he gestured to the dark parking lot. "I couldn't in good conscience let a lady walk out there alone at this hour. Would you mind if I escorted you to your car?" Clara studied him through the gap in the door. His tie was neatly knotted, his shoes polished. He stood back from the door, maintaining a respectful distance, his posture open and non-threatening. Something about him reminded her of the business professionals who sometimes stopped by during lunch hours. Polite, well-mannered, safe. She glanced at the dimly lit parking lot. The streetlight at the far end had been flickering for weeks, creating shifting shadows across the asphalt. She'd made this walk countless times before, but tonight, Victor's offer of company didn't seem unwelcome. Clara closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it. Victor's smile widened, revealing perfectly straight teeth. "Thank you," she said, adjusting her purse strap on her shoulder. "That's very kind of you." The morning sun peeked through the kitchen curtains as Clara cracked eggs into a sizzling pan. The gentle sound of Danny's footsteps coming down the stairs made her smile. Even after working late shifts, she never missed making breakfast for her son. It was their special time together. "Mom, you're up already?" Danny appeared in the doorway, his school backpack dragging behind him. His dark hair stuck up in all directions, just like his father's used to. "You got home super late. I heard you." Clara flipped the eggs with practiced ease. "Someone's got to feed my growing boy. Besides, I couldn't miss our morning talks." She placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him, ruffling his hair as she passed. "You work too hard," Danny said through a mouthful of toast. "Jimmy's mom works at the bank and she gets weekends off. Plus, she drives a fancy car." Clara sat down across from him with her coffee. "Well, Jimmy's mom doesn't get to wear this stylish uniform," she joked, tugging at her diner apron, "or eat unlimited French fries." Danny grinned, revealing a gap where his front tooth had recently fallen out. "Yeah, but you're always tired. I can make my own breakfast, Mom." "I'm 10 now." "I know you can, sweetie." Clara reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "But these morning moments? They're the best part of my day. Even better than free coffee refills. Way better." Clara watched as Danny devoured his breakfast. He had his father's appetite too. "Hey, how about we do something fun this weekend? Maybe catch that new superhero movie you've been talking about?" Danny's eyes lit up. "Really? But what about work? I'll switch shifts with Sarah. She owes me one anyway." Clara started clearing the dishes. "Now finish up, or you'll miss the bus." Danny wolfed down the last of his eggs and grabbed his backpack. "You're the best, Mom." He wrapped his arms around her waist in a tight hug. "Even if you do smell like burger grease sometimes." Clara laughed and hugged him back. "Thanks for that lovely compliment. Now scoot." She watched from the front door as Danny ran to catch the school bus, waving until he disappeared around the corner. These quiet morning moments made the late nights and tired feet worth it. At the diner, the morning rush was in full swing. Clara tied her apron with practiced efficiency, grabbing her order pad and pen. The familiar sounds and smells of breakfast service filled the air. Bacon sizzling on the grill, coffee brewing, and the gentle clinking of plates and silverware. "Order up," Joe, the cook, called from the kitchen window. "Table 4's getting cold." Clara was delivering plates of pancakes and refilling coffee cups when she noticed him. Victor sat in booth 7, his presence commanding attention without trying. He wore a crisp, blue button-down shirt that made his eyes stand out, even from across the room. Unlike the usual morning crowd of construction workers and office employees rushing to work, he seemed in no hurry at all. "Good morning," Clara said, approaching his table with the coffee pot. "What can I get for you today?" Victor's smile was warm and genuine. "Just coffee for now, Clara." He gestured to her name tag. "I hope you don't mind me using your name." "That's what it's there for," she replied, pouring his coffee with steady hands. Something about his attention made her feel self-conscious, aware of her wrinkled uniform and messy ponytail. "I must say," Victor continued, "the service here is exceptional. No wonder this place is so busy in the mornings." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Oh, that's kind of you to say, but it's really just coffee and eggs. Nothing special." "On the contrary." Victor took a sip of his coffee, maintaining eye contact. "Sometimes the simplest things, done with care, make all the difference. Don't you agree?" Before Clara could respond, a crash from the kitchen demanded her attention. "Excuse me," she said, grateful for the interruption. "Let me know if you need anything else." Throughout the morning rush, Clara found herself glancing toward booth 7. Victor remained there for nearly an hour, reading a newspaper and occasionally catching her eye with a polite nod. When he finally stood to leave, she hurried to clear his table. Under his coffee cup, she found a $50 bill. Clara picked it up, her eyes widening at the amount. This was more than 5 times the cost of his coffee. "Sir!" she called out, hurrying toward the door where Victor was putting on his coat. "I think you made a mistake with the tip." Victor turned, his expression amused. "No mistake, Clara. Good service deserves to be properly appreciated." He buttoned his coat with unhurried movements. "Besides, I imagine raising a child on your own isn't easy." Clara stared at the bill in her hand, feeling both grateful and uncomfortable. "This is too much. I can't accept." "Please," Victor interrupted gently. "You work hard. You deserve it." With a final smile, he walked out into the morning sunshine, leaving Clara standing there with the $50 bill and a strange mixture of embarrassment and suspicion churning in her stomach. The fluorescent lights of Joe's Diner flickered against the dark windows as Clara wiped down the last table. Her feet ached from the long shift, but the weight of tips in her apron pocket made it worthwhile. Danny needed new sneakers for school, and tonight's earnings would help cover the cost. "Good night, Joe," she called toward the kitchen, where the owner was finishing the day's paperwork. "Drive safe, Clara," his gruff voice echoed back. She gathered her purse from behind the counter and pulled her worn jean jacket closer around her shoulders. The evening air had turned chilly, and goosebumps rose on her arms as she stepped outside. The parking lot was eerily quiet, empty except for her old Honda Civic sitting alone under a dim streetlight. Clara's shoes clicked against the asphalt as she walked, keys clutched in her right hand, like her self-defense instructor had taught her years ago. The lot seemed darker than usual. One of the security lights must have burned out again. She made a mental note to remind Joe about getting it fixed. The sound of quick footsteps behind her made her pulse quicken. Before she could turn around, a rough hand grabbed at her purse strap. "Give it up," a hoarse voice demanded. Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she instinctively pulled back, years of training warring with her need to maintain her cover. The man yanked harder, forcing her to stumble backward. He wore dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "Help!" she called out, her voice echoing across the empty lot. The strap of her purse dug into her shoulder as she struggled to keep her balance. Suddenly, a figure burst from the shadows. "Hey! Let her go!" The attacker's grip loosened as Victor Hale appeared, his tall frame moving with surprising speed. He shoved the would-be thief hard, sending him stumbling backward. "Get out of here!" Victor's voice carried authority that seemed to startle even the attacker, who scrambled away into the darkness. Clara's hands trembled as she clutched her purse to her chest. Her heart was still racing, though now for different reasons. Victor turned to her, his face etched with concern. "Are you all right?" He stepped closer, one hand reaching out to steady her elbow. His touch was gentle, but lingered longer than necessary, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "I'm okay," Clara managed, forcing her voice to sound shakier than she felt. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "You shouldn't be out here alone this late," Victor said softly, his hand still on her arm. His cologne smelled expensive, a stark contrast to the greasy diner air she'd been breathing all day. "Let me walk you to your car." Clara nodded, playing the role of the grateful damsel while carefully noting every detail about him. The way he positioned himself slightly too close. How his eyes seemed to memorize her face. The controlled strength in his movements that spoke of someone used to physical confrontations. They walked the short distance to her car, Victor's hand never leaving her elbow. When they reached the Honda, he waited as she unlocked the door, then held it open for her. "Thank you again," Clara said, sliding into the driver's seat. "I don't know how to repay you." Victor smiled, and in the harsh glare of the streetlight, something flickered behind his eyes. "Just knowing you're safe is enough." He leaned down slightly, still holding the car door. "Though maybe you'll let me check on you tomorrow. I'd feel better knowing you're okay." Clara forced a grateful smile, though her instincts were screaming warnings. "Of course. I work the morning shift." "Perfect." Victor finally stepped back, closing her door with a gentle click. "Drive safely, Clara." She started the engine, watching in her rearview mirror as Victor stood in the lot, making sure she pulled away safely. His silhouette remained visible until she turned onto the main road, and only then did Clara let out a long breath. The attack had been too convenient, the timing too perfect. In her years with the FBI, she'd learned that coincidences rarely existed in cases like these. Victor's appearance had been carefully orchestrated. She was sure of it now. The question was, how far would he go to play the hero? Clara drove home carefully, maintaining her cover even alone in her car, knowing she couldn't risk breaking character for even a moment. But beneath her shaken exterior, her mind was already cataloging every detail of the encounter, preparing her report for tomorrow. Victor Hale had just shown his hand, and Clara Jenkins was ready to play hers. Clara stood at the kitchen counter, chopping carrots for the chicken soup, while the savory aroma of herbs filled their small but cozy home. The steady rhythm of her knife against the cutting board matched the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Through the window, the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Danny sat at their worn kitchen table, homework spread out before him, but his pencil hadn't moved in several minutes. Clara noticed his unusual quietness. Normally he'd be chattering away about his day at school. "Everything okay, sweetie?" she asked, sliding the carrots into the bubbling pot. Danny pushed his math worksheet aside and propped his chin on his hands. "Tommy Martinez made fun of me today." Clara wiped her hands on her apron and turned to face her son. "What happened?" "We were talking about the father-son camping trip next month." Danny's voice quivered slightly. "Tommy said I couldn't go because I don't have a dad anymore." Clara's heart clenched. She moved to sit beside Danny, wrapping an arm around his narrow shoulders. At 10 years old, he seemed so small, yet so grown up at the same time. "That must have hurt your feelings," she said softly. Danny nodded, his brown eyes, so like his father's, filling with tears. "I miss Dad. Sometimes I can hardly remember what his voice sounded like." Clara pulled him closer, running her fingers through his dark curls. "Your dad loved you so much, Danny. And he'd be so proud of the young man you're becoming." "Really?" Danny sniffled. "Really?" Clara reached for her phone and pulled up a saved video. "Here, want to watch the video of you and Dad building that treehouse?" Danny's face brightened as Clara pressed play. On the screen, Mark Jenkins lifted a much younger Danny onto his shoulders, both of them laughing as they hammered nails into wooden planks. "Look how strong you were, Dad," Danny exclaimed, pointing at the screen where Mark easily hoisted a heavy beam. Clara smiled, even as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. She blinked them back quickly, not wanting Danny to see. "He was strong in so many ways. And you know what? You're strong, just like him." "But Tommy said—" "Tommy was wrong," Clara interrupted gently. "Having one parent doesn't make you any less special. Some families look different from others, but what matters is the love we share." Danny leaned against her. "I wish the other kids understood that." "I know, sweetheart." Clara kissed the top of his head. Maybe we could do our own camping trip sometime? Just the two of us? Really? Danny perked up. Could we make s'mores and tell ghost stories? Absolutely. And I'll even let you stay up past bedtime. Danny's face lit up with a genuine smile, the kind that made his eyes crinkle just like Mark's used to. You're the best mom ever. Clara stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans. Well, this best mom ever needs to check on the soup before it boils over. Want to help me make the dumplings? Can I crack the eggs this time? Sure, but let's try to keep more egg in the bowl than on the counter this time, okay? They worked together, Danny carefully breaking eggs while Clara measured flour. The kitchen filled with warmth and laughter as they dropped spoonfuls of dumpling batter into the soup, some splashing more than others. After dinner, Clara tucked Danny into bed, making sure his favorite stuffed dinosaur was tucked in beside him. Sweet dreams, my brave boy. Mom? Danny called as she reached the doorway. I love you. I love you too, more than all the stars in the sky. Back in her own room, Clara changed into her comfortable flannel pajamas and settled onto her bed with a worn paperback novel. The house felt quiet now, almost too quiet. She found herself thinking about Mark, about the way he used to read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, making Danny giggle until he couldn't keep his eyes open anymore. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling her from her thoughts. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Clara hesitated before answering. Hello? Clara? It's Victor, from the diner. His voice was warm, friendly. I hope I'm not calling too late. I just wanted to check if you got home safely after everything that happened earlier. Clara felt a flutter in her stomach, one she hadn't experienced in years. That's very thoughtful of you. Yes, I'm home safe and sound. I'm glad to hear that. It was quite a scare earlier. Thank you again for helping me, Clara said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there. Anyone would have done the same, Victor replied. Though I have to admit, I'm glad I was the one who could help. Clara found herself smiling, something warm and unfamiliar spreading through her chest. Well, thank you for checking on me. That's really nice of you. Get some rest, Clara. I'll see you at the diner tomorrow? Yes, I'll be there. Good night, Victor. Clara set her phone down, the smile lingering on her face as she turned off her bedside lamp. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a glimmer of something she'd almost forgotten, possibility. She pulled her blanket up to her chin, the memory of Victor's concerned face and gentle voice following her as she drifted toward sleep. The moonlight filtered through her curtains, casting soft shadows across her room. Clara closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the unfamiliar warmth of being cared for, of having someone worry about her safety. It had been so long since anyone, besides Danny, had shown such concern for her well-being. As sleep began to overtake her, Clara's last conscious thought was how nice it felt to smile again. Really smile, without the weight of grief and loneliness pressing quite so heavily on her heart. The morning rush at Rosie's diner had settled into the quiet lull between breakfast and lunch. Clara wiped down the counter with practiced strokes, her mind drifting to Victor's phone call from the night before. The way his voice had held such genuine concern made her feel both warmed and unsettled. Marie Thompson emerged from the kitchen, her graying hair escaping from her hairnet as she balanced a tray of freshly baked pies. "Earth to Clara," she called out, setting the tray on the counter. "You've been cleaning that same spot for 5 minutes straight." Clara blinked, realizing she had indeed been stuck in place. "Sorry, just thinking about that handsome hero of yours." Marie's eyes twinkled as she began arranging the pies in the display case. "The one who swooped in, like Prince Charming last night?" Heat crept up Clara's neck. "He's not my hero, Marie. He just happened to be there." "Mm-hmm." Marie straightened up, crossed her arms, and fixed Clara with a knowing look. "And he just happened to call you at home too? Danny mentioned it when he stopped by for breakfast this morning." Clara tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, fidgeting with her pen. "He was just being nice, checking if I got home safe." "Nice is holding a door open, getting your phone number and calling you at home?" Marie shook her head. "That's interested, honey. The bell above the door chimed as an elderly couple walked in. Clara grabbed 2 menus, but Marie caught her arm. "We're not done talking about this. Take your break with me in 20." 20 minutes later, Clara found herself in the small break room, sharing a slice of Marie's famous apple pie. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the smell of coffee from the ancient percolator filled the cramped space. "So tell me everything," Marie said, settling into a rickety chair. "And I mean everything." Clara picked at her pie, the sweet cinnamon taste mingling with her uncertainty. "There's not much to tell. His name is Victor. He's been coming in for coffee the past few days. He seems kind. Kind enough to show up right when you're being mugged?" Marie's fork clinked against her plate. "That's quite a coincidence." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that after 20 years of serving coffee and pie, I've learned to trust my gut about people." Marie leaned forward, her expression softening. "And my gut is telling me to warn you to be careful." Clara set down her fork. "Marie, I'm not some lovesick teenager. I'm a grown woman with a son to think about. Exactly why you need to be extra careful." Marie reached across the table and squeezed Clara's hand. "Look, I know how hard it's been since Tom passed. 5 years is a long time to be alone." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes. "I'm not looking for anyone to replace Tom. Of course not, sweetie. But you're still young, and it's natural to want companionship." Marie's voice grew gentle. "Just don't let loneliness cloud your judgment. We don't know anything about this Victor fellow." Clara nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "He said he's in real estate, just moved to town a few months ago." "And has he mentioned why he keeps showing up at the diner at closing time?" Clara hadn't thought about that. He said he works late." "Maybe he does." Marie stood up, gathering their plates. "Or maybe there's more to the story. All I'm saying is, take your time getting to know him. Real estate agents work during the day, not at night, and they don't usually hang around diners after dark." The rest of Clara's shift passed in a blur of coffee refills and dinner orders. Marie's words kept echoing in her head, mixing with memories of Victor's warm smile and gentle manner. Was she being too trusting, or was Marie being overprotective? At 10 o'clock, Clara hung up her apron and gathered her things. Marie was counting the register, but she looked up as Clara passed. "Text me when you get home safe, okay?" "Yes, Mom," Clara teased, but she felt grateful for her friend's concern. The night air was crisp as Clara stepped out of the diner. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the asphalt, and her footsteps echoed in the quiet. As she reached for her car keys, something made her pause and look around. Across the street, partially hidden behind a large oak tree, sat a dark sedan. Through the glow of a distant streetlight, she could make out a figure in the driver's seat. The car looked exactly like Victor's. Clara's heart stuttered in her chest. She blinked hard, and when she looked again, she could have sworn she saw the figure duck down. Was she imagining things? Marie's warnings had her jumping at shadows now. She fumbled with her keys, trying to convince herself she was being paranoid. Plenty of people drove dark sedans. It probably wasn't even the same car, but as she slid into her driver's seat and locked the doors, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the trees, casting dappled shadows on Clara and Danny's small backyard garden. The spring air carried the sweet scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. Clara knelt beside a tomato plant, carefully loosening the soil around its base, while Danny watered the row of green bean sprouts they'd planted last weekend. "Mom, look!" Danny pointed excitedly at a tiny green shoot breaking through the soil. "Our carrots are coming up." Clara sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her gardening glove. "You've been taking good care of them, sweetie. Your dad would be so proud of your green thumb." Danny's face lit up at the mention of his father. "Really? Did Dad like gardening too?" "He sure did." Clara smiled, remembering Tom's enthusiasm for their little vegetable patch. "He's the one who built these raised beds, said every kid should know how to grow their own food." Danny carefully touched one of the carrot sprouts. "I remember him showing me how to plant sunflower seeds. I was really little, though." "You were 5. Clara's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Those sunflowers grew taller than the fence. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Clara pruning the tomato plants while Danny pulled weeds from around the strawberry patch. The morning sun warmed their backs, and birds chirped in the maple tree that shaded their yard. This was Clara's favorite time, just her and Danny, working together, making something grow. "Can we have grilled cheese for lunch?" Danny asked, dumping a handful of weeds into their yard waste bin. "With tomato soup?" "Of course." Clara stood up, stretching her back. "And maybe we can use some of our fresh herbs in the soup. See those basil plants you helped start from seeds? They're ready for their first harvest." Danny beamed with pride. "I did that. I grew actual food." Clara watched as her son carefully snipped a few basil leaves, his tongue poking out in concentration. These peaceful moments made all the hard work worth it. Their little house might not be fancy, but she'd created a safe, happy home for Danny. The garden, the warm kitchen, the family photos on the walls, it was all theirs. After washing up, they made lunch together. Danny stood on a step stool at the counter, buttering bread slices while Clara heated the soup. The kitchen filled with the smell of melting cheese and tomatoes. "Mom?" Danny asked, carefully flipping a sandwich in the pan. "Can we invite Mrs. Rodriguez over for dinner sometime? She always waves when we're in the garden, and she lives all alone." Clara's heart swelled with love for her sensitive, thoughtful boy. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. Maybe we can share some of our vegetables with her when they're ready." They spent the afternoon playing board games and doing Danny's homework. Clara helped him with his math problems while a batch of chocolate chip cookies baked in the oven. The house filled with warmth and the sweet smell of vanilla. As evening approached, Clara started preparing a simple dinner of spaghetti and meatballs. Danny sat at the kitchen table, coloring a picture of their garden while telling her about a book he was reading in class. And then the main character finds out his teacher is actually an alien in disguise. Danny gestured dramatically with his crayon. "But a friendly alien who just wants to learn about Earth kids." Clara laughed, stirring the sauce. "That sounds like quite a story. Maybe we can read it together before bed tonight?" A sharp knock at the front door made them both jump. Clara glanced at the clock. 7:15 p.m. They weren't expecting anyone. "Stay here, honey," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Through the kitchen window, she could see the sky turning dusky purple, too late for casual visitors. Another knock, more insistent this time. Clara approached the front door cautiously, checking through the peephole. Her stomach tightened when she saw Victor standing on her porch, holding a bouquet of roses. She hadn't given him her address. She hadn't invited him over. The door rattled with a third knock. "Clara?" Victor's voice carried through the door, smooth and confident. "I know you're home. I saw your car in the driveway." Her hand hesitated on the deadbolt. Something about his tone made her skin prickle. But if she didn't answer, he might make a scene. Danny was just in the next room. Clara opened the door partway, keeping the chain lock fastened. "Victor, what are you doing here?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Surprise! I thought I'd bring you these." He held up the roses, deep red, probably expensive. "Going to invite me in?" "I'm actually in the middle of making dinner with my son," Clara said firmly. "This isn't a good time." Victor's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his expression. "Don't be rude, Clara. I drove all this way." Before she could respond, he pressed one hand against the door, pushing it open with enough force to snap the chain lock. Clara stumbled backward as Victor stepped inside, still clutching the roses. He closed the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "Now," he said pleasantly, as if he hadn't just forced his way into her home, "where should I put these lovely flowers?" Clara's heart pounded as Victor stepped into her living room, still holding the bouquet of red roses. Something about his uninvited presence made the cozy space feel suddenly smaller, more confined. Danny looked up from his video game on the couch, his eyes widening at the stranger in their home. "Danny, honey." Clara kept her voice steady. "Would you please go to your room and finish that homework we talked about?" "But Mom, I finished." "Now please." She gave him the look that meant no arguments. Danny gathered his game controller, shooting uncertain glances between his mother and Victor as he shuffled down the hallway. Clara waited until she heard his bedroom door click shut before turning to face their unexpected visitor. "Victor, I appreciate the flowers, but you shouldn't be here." She crossed her arms, maintaining distance between them. "I didn't give you my address." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes as he set the roses on her coffee table. "Oh, come now, Clara. A concerned friend can't stop by to check on you?" His voice carried an edge she'd never heard before, especially after that scary incident in the parking lot. Clara's skin prickled. The attempted robbery, something about it had felt staged, but she'd pushed the thought aside. Now, watching Victor survey her living room like he owned it, those doubts came rushing back. "That's very thoughtful," she said carefully, "but I'm actually quite busy today with Danny." "Such a sweet boy," Victor interrupted, picking up a framed photo of Danny from the side table. "Must be hard, raising him all alone. So many dangers out there for a single mom." He set the photo down with deliberate slowness. "Women like you always need protection, Clara." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Clara's throat went dry as Victor's facade crumbled away, revealing something cold and predatory. Underneath, his earlier charm vanished like smoke. "I managed just fine," Clara said firmly. "And I'd like you to leave now." Victor chuckled, but the sound held no warmth. "You know what I've noticed about women in your situation? So desperate for help, for connection." He took a step closer. "Working those long hours at that little diner, scraping by on tips. Must get lonely." Clara backed away, her mind racing. She needed to get to her bedroom without making him suspicious. "I'm not desperate or lonely, Victor, and I'm not interested in whatever you're offering." "No?" His eyes hardened. "That's not what I've observed these past few weeks. Watching you leave work late at night, always alone. Seeing you at the grocery store with your little boy, counting pennies at the checkout." He smiled, showing teeth. "I know everything about you, Clara. Your routine, your struggles, your weaknesses." Ice flooded Clara's veins. He'd been stalking her, studying her like prey. "You need to get out of my house. Now." "Or what?" Victor's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You'll call the police? Tell them the nice man who saved you from a mugger is making you uncomfortable?" He laughed again. "Who do you think they'll believe? The respected businessman or the struggling waitress?" Clara forced herself to appear shaken, vulnerable, exactly what he expected. "Please," she whispered, letting her voice quaver. "My son is here." "Yes, he is." Victor's implied threat hung in the air. "Remember that, Clara. Remember how much you have to lose." She wrapped her arms around herself, playing the role of the frightened single mother. I need a minute. Please." Victor smiled indulgently, clearly enjoying her apparent distress. "Take all the time you need. We have plenty to discuss about your future arrangements." Clara hurried down the hallway to her bedroom, closing the door behind her. Her hands were steady as she moved to her dresser, sliding open the bottom drawer. Beneath a stack of sweaters lay a locked metal box. She quickly entered the combination and lifted the lid. Inside gleamed her FBI badge and service weapon. Clara checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, her earlier fear replaced by cold determination. She picked up her badge, running her thumb across the federal seal. "You picked the wrong woman, Victor," she whispered. "I'm FBI." After Danny's door clicked shut, Clara moved silently through the darkened house, checking each window lock and drawing the curtains. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled her secure phone from its hiding place inside a hollowed-out Bible on her bedside table. She punched in the familiar number, her heart still racing from the confrontation with Victor. "Jenkins reporting," she whispered into the phone, settling onto the edge of her bed. The springs creaked beneath her weight. "Go ahead, Clara." Agent Sarah Martinez's voice crackled through the encrypted line. They'd worked together for 5 years, and Sarah had become more than just her handler. She was a friend who understood the toll of undercover work. "Victor Hale made contact at my home tonight." Clara kept her voice low, conscious of Danny just down the hall. "He showed up uninvited. The way he pushed his way in." "Sarah, this isn't just about targeting vulnerable women. The things he said, the way he operates it, fits the pattern we've been tracking with the trafficking ring." "Are you and Danny safe right now?" Sarah's tone sharpened with concern. Yes, for the moment. But I had to show my hand. Clara rubbed her temples, remembering Victor's face when she'd revealed her badge. He knows I'm FBI now. The whole operation could be compromised. Tell me everything, start to finish. Clara described the evening's events in detail: Victor's arrival with flowers, his subtle threats, the cold calculation in his eyes. He's been watching us, Sarah. He mentioned details about our routine that he couldn't have known just from the diner. He knows when Danny catches the school bus, which church we attend, even my late husband's name. This matches what our other sources have indicated, Sarah said. We've suspected for months that Hale's group has been gathering intel on potential targets before making contact. They're organized, methodical. Clara stood and paced the small bedroom, her sock-clad feet silent on the worn carpet. I've gotten close to several of the women at the diner who fit the victim profile. Single moms, financial struggles, limited support systems. 3 of them have disappeared in the past month, just stopped showing up for work. Their kids, too. Any leads on where they might have been taken? Nothing concrete yet, but Victor let something slip tonight about opportunities abroad for women who need a fresh start. Clara's voice hardened. We both know what that means. International trafficking. Sarah sighed heavily. Clara, I know you want to see this through, but with your cover blown, I'm not backing down, Clara interrupted. These women trust me. I'm their best chance at finding out where the others have been taken. And now that Victor knows who I am, Danny and I are already in danger. We might as well make it count. There was a long pause on the line. We'll increase surveillance on your house, put a detail on Danny's school. But Clara, you need to be extra careful now. These people— A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Clara froze, her hand instinctively moving toward her weapon. Danny, is that you? Her son's tousled head appeared around the doorframe. Mom, I can't sleep. I need to go, Clara whispered into the phone. I'll check in tomorrow. She tucked the secure phone away and opened her arms. Danny ran into them, burying his face in her shoulder. At 10 years old, he was getting too big to hold like this, but tonight she needed the comfort as much as he did. That man scared me, Danny mumbled into her shirt. Clara stroked his hair, fighting back tears. I know, baby. But you don't need to be afraid. Remember what we always say? God is our protector, Danny recited, and my mom is pretty tough too. That's right. She managed a smile, though her chest ached. Now, how about some hot chocolate before bed? The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Clara sat in their usual pew at First Baptist, Danny pressed close against her side as sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows. The familiar sense of wood polish and old hymnals usually brought her peace, but today her nerves were on high alert. She scanned the faces in the congregation, while Pastor Mike led the opening prayer. Mrs. Johnson with her elaborate hat in the front row. The Martinez family with their 4 squirming children 2 pews ahead. Mr. Peters dozing in his usual corner spot. Everything looked normal, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Danny squeezed her hand. Mom, you're supposed to close your eyes during prayer. Clara squeezed back and bowed her head, but kept her eyes open, watching through her lashes. The memory of Victor's cold smile haunted her. He knew they came here every Sunday. Would he be bold enough to show up at church? The congregation's voices rose in unified prayer, but Clara's thoughts were far from peaceful. She'd chosen this life, this calling, to protect the vulnerable and bring down predators like Victor. But had she chosen it for Danny too? Was it fair to expose him to these dangers? She thought of the missing women from the diner, of their children who had disappeared with them. Someone had to stand up for them. Someone had to be willing to face the darkness to bring them home. The sound of shuffling feet and creaking pews brought her back to the present as the congregation stood for the first hymn. Danny's clear voice rang out beside her, singing about amazing grace with complete, innocent faith. Clara rose slowly, her eyes still scanning the crowd, her hand resting close to the concealed weapon beneath her Sunday dress. She knew Victor was out there somewhere, probably already reporting to his associates about the FBI agent in their midst. But here in this sanctuary, surrounded by her church family, Clara drew strength from the familiar words of the hymn. Whatever came next, she wasn't facing it alone. Danny leaned his head against her arm as they sang, trusting and unafraid. Clara wrapped her arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. She might not be able to shield him from every danger, but she could teach him about courage, about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. The morning sunlight caught the gold cross on the altar, sending ribbons of light dancing across the worn pages of her hymnal. Clara's voice joined the others, strong and clear, while her watchful eyes never stopped their careful surveillance of the gathered congregation. The Sunday afternoon sun cast long shadows across the church parking lot as Clara hugged Danny tight. "I'll be back soon, sweetheart. Be good for Marie, okay?" "Mom, I'm not 5 anymore," Danny said with an eye roll, but he squeezed her back just as firmly. Marie stood by her beat-up Toyota, keys jingling in her hand. "We'll have pizza and watch those superhero movies he loves. Don't worry about us." Clara watched them drive away, her heart heavy. She hated leaving Danny, even for a few hours, but this meeting couldn't wait. She climbed into her own car, a modest Honda that helped maintain her cover as a struggling single mom, and headed toward the FBI field office. The building looked like any other office complex from the outside, bland concrete and tinted windows. Clara badged through security and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Her sensible waitress shoes clicked against the linoleum as she made her way to the conference room. Special Agent Tom Roberts, her direct supervisor, looked up as she entered. His salt and pepper hair was disheveled and dark circles rimmed his eyes. 3 other agents sat around the table, surrounded by stacks of files and laptops. "Jenkins," Roberts nodded. "Glad you could make it. How's the cover holding up?" Clara sank into an empty chair. "It was holding up fine until last night. Victor made his move sooner than we expected." "Tell us everything," said Agent Sarah Chen, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup, gathering her thoughts. "He showed up at my house uninvited. Brought flowers, tried to push his way in. The charm dropped pretty quick when I challenged him. There was something in his eyes. Cold. Calculated. This isn't his first time targeting women." Roberts tapped his keyboard, and photos appeared on the wall screen. Clara's breath caught. The images showed different women, all single mothers, all in their late 30s or early 40s, all working service industry jobs. "Meet Victor Hale's previous targets," Roberts said grimly. "Or at least the ones we know about. 3 of these women disappeared in the last 18 months. 2 more reported stalking incidents but couldn't prove anything. He's connected to the Hunter Creek trafficking ring," Agent Chen added, pulling up more files. "We've been building a case for 2 years, but they're careful. They target vulnerable women, single moms mostly. Women who might not be missed right away, whose disappearances could be explained away as them just leaving town for a fresh start." Clara's stomach churned as she studied the faces on screen. Women like her, or at least like the woman she was pretending to be. Women with children, working hard to make ends meet, probably grateful for a kind word or a generous tip from a handsome stranger. The ring operates across 3 states. Agent Mike Torres joined in, spreading out a map marked with red pins. "They have safe houses here, here, and here, but we haven't been able to connect Victor directly to any of them. He's careful, never leaves a trace." "Until now," Clara said softly. "He slipped up with me, got overconfident." Roberts leaned forward, his expression serious. "Clara, you need to understand, this is bigger than we initially thought. When we placed you undercover at the diner, we were following up on suspicious activity in the area. We didn't know we'd hook someone this high up in the organization." "What are you saying?" Clara asked, though she already knew. "We're saying this just got a lot more dangerous," Chen answered. "Victor knows who you are now. He'll be watching, waiting for you to make a mistake. And these people, they don't leave loose ends." Clara closed her eyes briefly, thinking of Danny's smile this morning at church, how he'd sung along with the hymns in his clear boy's voice. She thought of the women on the screen, wondered if they had children waiting for them somewhere. "We can pull you out," Robert said quietly. "No one would blame you. You have Danny to think about." The room fell silent, waiting for her response. Clara opened her eyes, and sat up straighter. "That's exactly why I need to stay in," she said firmly. "These women, they're mothers too. They have children wondering where they are, why they haven't come home. If Victor's targeting the diner, he'll just move on to someone else if I leave. Maybe Marie would be next, or any of the other single moms who work there." She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I'm already established in the community. I have backup plans in place for Danny. And now that we know what we're dealing with, we can be more prepared." Roberts studied her face. "You're sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Clara replied. "This isn't just a case anymore, it's a calling. These women deserve justice, and their children deserve to know what happened to their mothers." Agent Chen reached across the table and squeezed Clara's hand. "We'll increase surveillance on your house, set up panic buttons, emergency protocols. Danny's school will be monitored, and we'll fast-track the investigation," Torres added. "Now that we know Victor's involved, we can start connecting the dots more quickly." Clara nodded, grateful for their support but already feeling the weight of what lay ahead. She looked again at the photos of the missing women, letting their faces burn into her memory. "I need to get back," she said, standing up. "Danny will be wondering where I am, and I have the early shift tomorrow." "Be careful," Roberts warned as she headed for the door. "Victor's going to be watching every move you make." "I know," Clara said. "But he's not the only one who knows how to watch and wait." Clara stood in Danny's doorway, watching as he arranged his stuffed animals in their usual bedtime formation. The desk lamp cast a warm glow across his room, making the space-themed wallpaper seem to shimmer with imaginary stars. Her heart squeezed at how much he looked like his father. The same thoughtful brown eyes, the same gentle way of moving through the world. "Time for bed, sweetheart," she said, moving to sit on the edge of his mattress. Danny climbed under his rocket ship comforter, but his usual bedtime smile was missing. "Mom?" His voice was smaller than usual. "Can we talk about something?" Clara smoothed his dark hair back from his forehead. "Of course we can. What's on your mind?" Danny fidgeted with the edge of his blanket, not meeting her eyes. "I heard you on the phone earlier. You sounded worried." A chill ran through Clara's body, but she kept her voice steady. "Work stuff, honey. Nothing for you to worry about." "But I do worry." His lower lip trembled slightly. What if something happens to you? Like Dad." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She gathered Danny into her arms, feeling his thin shoulders shake as he pressed his face against her shoulder. The memory of telling him about his father's car accident 3 years ago flashed through her mind, the way his small face had crumpled in disbelief, how he'd clung to her for hours afterward. "Oh, Danny," she whispered, rocking him gently. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." "But you can't promise that," he said, his voice muffled against her shirt. "Dad probably didn't think he was going anywhere either." Clara pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "You're right. I can't promise nothing will ever happen to me, but I can promise that I will always do everything in my power to come home to you. You're the most important thing in my world, Danny Jenkins." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I just don't want to be alone." "Listen to me," Clara said, taking his small hands in hers. "You are never alone. You have me, Marie, our whole church family, and—" She touched the silver cross hanging around his neck, identical to the one she wore. "You have God watching over you. And your dad? He's watching too, you know." Danny touched his necklace, a gift from his father on his 7th birthday. "Do you really think he can see us?" "I know he can." Clara smiled, though her eyes stung with tears. "Remember what Pastor Mike says? Love never dies. It just changes form." Danny was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Mom, do you still miss him?" "Every day," Clara admitted softly. "But having you helps. You're so much like him, brave and kind and smart." This brought a small smile to Danny's face. Dad was really brave, wasn't he? "The bravest," Clara agreed, thinking of her late husband's career as a police officer. The irony of her current situation wasn't lost on her. How she was now living the same kind of double life he had, walking the line between protection and danger. "Will you tell me a story about him?" Danny asked, settling back against his pillows. "From before I was born?" Clara tucked the blanket around him, grateful for this familiar request. How about the time he helped Mrs. Rodriguez's cat out of that tree? He was so scared of heights, but he climbed up anyway because it was the right thing to do. As she told the story, she watched Danny's eyes grow heavy, though he fought to stay awake. She kept her voice soft and steady, even as her mind raced with thoughts of Victor, of the trafficking ring, of all the dangers swirling just outside their safe little bubble. "Mom?" Danny murmured, half asleep now. "Promise you'll be here in the morning?" Clara leaned down and kissed his forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. "I promise, sweetheart. I'll make pancakes before school, okay?" "With chocolate chips?" he asked, his eyes already closed. "With chocolate chips," she confirmed, standing carefully. She adjusted his nightlight, making sure the gentle blue glow was just right. At the doorway, she paused, watching his breathing, even out into sleep. "I love you to the moon and back," she whispered, their traditional goodnight words. "Love you more," came his drowsy reply. Clara closed his door part way, leaving it open just enough for the hallway light to spill in. She made her way downstairs to the kitchen, her footsteps silent on the carpet. The house felt too quiet now, too full of shadows and what-ifs. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table, pulling her rosary beads from her pocket. The familiar wooden beads felt smooth against her fingers as she clutched them tightly. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting patterns on the worn tablecloth. "Oh, Tom," she whispered, her late husband's name catching in her throat. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I want to help these women, stop these monsters. But Danny needs me. He's so scared of losing me, just like we lost you." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she fingered each bead, prayers mixing with memories. She remembered Tom's smile, his unwavering sense of justice. The way he'd always said that doing the right thing wasn't always the easy thing. "Give me strength," she whispered, closing her eyes. "Help me protect our boy. Help me finish this mission. Help me be as brave as you were." The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the darkness as Clara continued her prayers, holding on to her faith and her memories like a lifeline in the growing storm. The morning sun streamed through the diner's wide windows, creating bright rectangles on the worn linoleum floor. Clara moved between tables with practiced ease, refilling coffee cups and taking orders. Her smile remained steady, but her heart thundered against her ribs every time the bell above the door chimed. When Victor finally walked in at 10:15 a.m., Clara's fingers tightened around the coffee pot she was holding. He chose his usual booth, the one with the best view of the entire diner, and settled in as if he owned the place, as if nothing had changed, as if he hadn't threatened her in her own home just days ago. "Morning, Clara," he called out, his voice carrying across the half-empty diner. Several regular customers looked up, probably noting the familiar way he addressed her. That was his game. Appearing normal, friendly, just another face in the crowd. Clara forced her feet to move, approaching his table with the same casual stride she used with any customer. "Coffee?" she asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Please." Victor's smile was perfect, warm, charming, with just the right touch of friendliness. But his eyes were cold, watching her every movement as she poured his coffee. "And the breakfast special, if you don't mind." Clara nodded, jotting down his order even though she didn't need to. Her training kicked in, helping her maintain her cover. Act natural. Stay in character. Coming right up. As she turned to leave, Victor's hand brushed against hers, seemingly by accident. "You seem tense today, Clara. Everything okay?" The touch sent a wave of revulsion through her, but Clara kept her expression neutral. "Just tired. You know how it is with single parenting." "Oh, I'm sure I do." His smile widened slightly. "It must be so hard, doing everything alone." The threat in his words was clear, even though his tone remained conversational. Clara retreated to the kitchen, where she took a moment to steady her breathing. Through the service window, she could see Victor sitting calmly, reading something on his phone. "Order up," Joe the cook called out, sliding a plate toward her. The familiar routine of work helped ground her. Clara delivered meals, cleared tables, and chatted with regulars, all while keeping Victor in her peripheral vision. He took his time with his meal, making it last nearly an hour. Every time Clara approached his table to refill his coffee, he engaged her in small talk that seemed innocent enough to others but was laced with double meanings. "This weather reminds me of when I was a kid," he said at one point. "Used to walk home from school on days like this. You know the park on Maple Street? The one with the playground?" Clara's stomach clenched. That was Danny's route home from school. "Such a nice neighborhood," Victor continued, stirring his coffee slowly. "Safe, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business." Clara managed a tight smile. "More coffee?" "No thank you." Victor dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "I should get going. Places to be, people to see." He stood, pulling out his wallet. "Keep the change." He left a $20 bill on the table, partially hidden under his coffee cup. Clara waited until he was gone before approaching to clear the table. As she lifted the cup, she saw it. A small piece of paper, folded precisely. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the note. The handwriting was neat, almost artistic. "I know where your boy goes after school." The words blurred as Clara stared at them. The diner's usual morning sounds, clinking plates, murmured conversations, the sizzle of the grill, seemed to fade away. All she could hear was her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The paper crumpled in her fist as her FBI training warred with her maternal instinct. The agent in her knew she should document the threat, add it to the growing case file. The mother in her wanted to run straight to Danny's school and bring him home. "Clara? Table 6 needs more napkins," Marie called from across the diner. Clara quickly tucked the note into her apron pocket. Her hands were still shaking as she grabbed a stack of napkins from the counter. She forced herself to keep moving, to maintain her cover, even as Victor's words echoed in her mind. The weight of the crumpled note felt like a stone in her pocket, a reminder that this case had just become even more dangerous and far more personal. Clara sat in the dim conference room at the FBI field office, surrounded by case files and surveillance photos spread across the table. The wall-mounted screens displayed maps dotted with red pins marking locations of interest. Agent Luis Ramos stood beside her, his sleeves rolled up as he traced patterns between the markers. "Look at this pattern," Ramos said, drawing an invisible line with his finger. "Victor's car has been spotted at these motels along Interstate 95 at least twice a month." He tapped several locations on the map. Always on Tuesday nights. Always between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Clara leaned forward, studying the pattern. Her years of experience helped her see what others might miss. "Those aren't just random stops," she said, her voice tight. "They're handoffs." Ramos nodded, pulling up additional files on his laptop. "We've been tracking missing persons reports in these areas. 2 women disappeared in the last 3 months. He slid 2 photographs across the table. Sarah Miller, 28, single mom working as a waitress in Newark, and Jennifer Chen, 32, recently divorced, worked at a convenience store in Baltimore. Clara's stomach churned as she looked at the women's faces. They could have been her. They were her, in a way. Women struggling to make ends meet, vulnerable, probably grateful for any kindness shown to them. The same trap Victor had tried to set for her. Both women were last seen leaving work late at night, Ramos continued. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, they just vanished. Clara picked up Sarah Miller's photo. The woman's smile was bright, hopeful. Her son would be waiting for her to come home, just like Danny waited for Clara every day. "Have you interviewed their families?" "Yesterday." Ramos's voice softened. "Sarah's mother is watching her 8-year-old daughter. Jennifer's sister said she'd been talking about a new friend who'd been coming to her store, bringing her coffee, offering to walk her to her car." "Victor's playbook," Clara said, her fingers clenching around the photo. "He used the same approach with me at the diner." Ramos pulled up more surveillance footage on the screen. "We've identified 3 of his associates. The images showed men in business, casual attire, nothing remarkable about them. They could have been anyone's neighbor, co-worker, or friend. They operate in different cities, but they all report to Victor. He's not just a recruiter, he's running the entire East Coast operation." Clara stood up, walking closer to the screen. "These men, they're all like him, aren't they? Clean-cut, charming, knowing exactly what to say to make a lonely woman feel special. Predators? Hiding in plain sight, Ramos agreed. He pulled out his notebook, flipping to a fresh page. Tell me again about your interactions with Victor. Every detail matters. Clara closed her eyes, recalling each encounter. He started coming to the diner about 3 weeks ago. Always polite, good tipper. Made small talk about the weather. Asked about my day. Nothing that would raise red flags. She opened her eyes, looking at Sarah and Jennifer's photos again. Then, the night of the supposed robbery attempt. The setup, Ramos interjected. Classic tactic. Staging a rescue to build trust. Right. Clara's voice hardened. After that, he started showing up more frequently. Called to check on me, I thought. She paused, swallowing hard. I thought maybe God was finally giving me a second chance at happiness. Stupid, right? Not stupid, Ramos said firmly. Human. That's what makes you good at this job, Clara. You understand these women because you know their struggles. Clara walked back to the table, picking up one of Victor's surveillance photos. He's watching Danny's school now. Left me a note this morning, making sure I knew it. Ramos straightened, his expression concerned. We should pull you out. If he's escalating... No. Clara's voice was steel. We pull out now, we lose our best chance at finding Sarah and Jennifer. And the others we don't even know about yet. She looked at the map again, at all those red pins representing destroyed lives. These women, they don't have anyone else fighting for them. Ramos was quiet for a moment, studying her. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but we're increasing surveillance on both you and Danny. I'm assigning 2 more agents to his school route. Thank you. Clara's shoulders relaxed slightly. Have we made any progress tracking Victor's finances? Some. Ramos pulled up another screen showing bank records. He's careful, uses multiple accounts and shell companies. But we've found a pattern of cash deposits in cities matching our red pins. He pointed to several transactions. Always within 24 hours of his motel visits. Clara leaned in, examining the numbers. These deposits, they're getting larger. The operation's growing. Ramos confirmed grimly. Which means more women are being trafficked. Clara pressed her palms flat against the table, her head bowing under the weight of it all. The faces of Sarah and Jennifer seemed to stare up at her from their photos, joined by the ghostly images of all the other potential victims out there. Somewhere, their families were praying for their safe return, just as she prayed every night for Danny's safety. Clara. Ramos's voice was gentle but firm. You're stronger than you think. These women need someone who understands them. Someone who can get close enough to bring this whole operation down. She looked up at him, seeing the steady confidence in his eyes. Sometimes I don't feel strong at all, she admitted. When I think about Danny, about what could happen. That's exactly what makes you strong, Ramos said. You're not fearless. You're facing your fear, and doing what needs to be done anyway. That's real courage. Clara straightened up, squaring her shoulders. She looked one last time at the photos of Sarah and Jennifer, then at the map with its constellation of red pins. Each one represented a woman like her, a family torn apart, a child waiting for their mother to come home. We need to move carefully, she said, her voice steadier now. Victor's smart. If he suspects we're onto his operation, we'll be ready, Ramos assured her. Every move documented, every piece of evidence secured. When we take him down, it'll be for good. Clara nodded, gathering her things. Her heart felt heavy with the weight of what they'd discovered, but her resolve was stronger. As she prepared to leave the meeting, her hand brushed against her pocket where Victor's threatening note still sat. The paper crinkled, reminding her of the danger lurking just beyond her son's school playground. The evening sun cast long shadows across the church parking lot as Clara pulled into her usual spot. The familiar brick building with its white steeple brought an immediate sense of comfort. Sweet aromas of home-cooked dishes wafted through the air, drawing them toward the warmth of Fellowship Hall. Mom, I can smell Mrs. Peterson's fried chicken from here. Danny bounced in his seat, his face lighting up with anticipation. Clara couldn't help but smile. Well, let's not keep that chicken waiting then. She grabbed their contribution, a homemade apple pie cooling in its tin, from the back seat. Danny rushed ahead, holding the heavy wooden door open for her like the gentleman she was raising him to be. The familiar sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air as they stepped inside. The fellowship hall buzzed with activity. Long tables draped in white cloths stretched end to end, loaded with steaming casseroles, colorful salads, and pies of every variety. Church members milled about, filling plates and catching up on the week's events. "Clara, Danny, over here!" Mrs. Peterson waved from behind the serving table, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing her favorite floral apron. She'd been like a grandmother to Danny since his father passed. Clara set down her pie and gave the older woman a warm hug. "The chicken smells amazing as always, Mrs. Peterson." "Oh, honey, you know it's just an old family recipe." She turned to Danny with a conspiratorial wink. "I made sure to save an extra drumstick just for you, young man." Danny's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. You're the best." Clara watched as her son eagerly filled his plate, piling it high with fried chicken, potato salad, and green beans. For a moment, she could almost forget about Victor, about the case, about all the darkness lurking at the edges of their lives. Here, surrounded by their church family, everything felt normal. They found seats at a table with the Thompsons, whose daughter Sarah was in Danny's class. While the kids chatted about their latest school project, Clara let herself relax into easy conversation with Beth Thompson about garden tips and recipe swaps. "Mom, can I have seconds?" Danny asked, his plate already clean. Clara nodded. "Just remember to save room for dessert." As Danny scampered back to the buffet line, Beth leaned in closer. "Clara, honey, how are you really doing? You've seemed distracted lately." Clara forced a smile, touched by her friend's concern. "Just busy with work. You know how it is." "Well, we're all here for you, don't forget that." Beth squeezed her hand gently. The evening progressed with the comfortable rhythm of a close-knit community. Pastor Mike said grace over dessert, his deep voice carrying messages of gratitude and hope. Clara closed her eyes during the prayer, feeling the strength of faith surrounding them. Danny demolished a slice of Mrs. Peterson's chocolate cake, while Clara savored a piece of her own apple pie. The fellowship hall gradually grew quieter as families began heading home, children yawning and parents gathering empty dishes. "Ready to head home, sweetie?" Clara asked, noting Danny's drooping eyes despite his protests that he wasn't tired. They said their goodbyes, accepting hugs and leftover containers pressed into their hands. Mrs. Peterson insisted they take home some chicken, and Clara didn't have the heart to refuse. The night air had grown cooler when they stepped outside. Stars twinkled overhead in the clear sky, and crickets chirped their evening symphony. Danny walked close to her side, his small hand finding hers naturally. "That was fun, Mom," he said, stifling a yawn. "Mrs. Peterson's chicken really is the best." "It sure is." Clara squeezed his hand, treasuring these simple moments. "Maybe we can get her recipe someday." They reached their car, and Clara helped Danny buckle in, making sure he was secure before sliding into the driver's seat. The engine hummed to life, and she pulled out of the parking lot, watching the church grow smaller in her rearview mirror. Danny dozed off almost immediately, his head tilted against the window, looking peaceful and innocent in the passing streetlights. Clara felt her heart swell with love and fierce protectiveness. These were the moments that reminded her why she did what she did, why she fought so hard to keep other families safe. The streets were quiet as they drove home, passing familiar houses with warm lights glowing in windows. Clara hummed softly along with the radio, keeping the volume low for Danny's sake. For just a little while, she let herself believe they were just another family heading home after a normal church dinner. Then she saw it. A dark sedan, 3 cars back, matching their turns too precisely to be coincidence. Clara's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her peaceful evening shattering like glass. She recognized the make and model Victor's car, the same one she'd spotted watching the diner, now following them home from church. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her breathing steady, not wanting to wake Danny. She checked the rearview mirror again. The car maintained its distance, but it was definitely there, definitely following. The warmth and comfort of the church potluck seemed suddenly far away, replaced by cold reality. Danny shifted in his sleep, murmuring something about chocolate cake. Clara glanced at him, then back at the mirror, where Victor's car lurked like a shadow. The contrast between her sleeping son's innocence and the menace behind them made her stomach clench. Their normal evening had been an illusion, after all. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the darkening sky, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring down at Clara. She pulled her worn diner uniform closer, fighting off both the evening chill and her growing unease. The wire taped to her chest felt cold against her skin, a constant reminder of what was at stake. "Sound check, Agent Jenkins," crackled a voice in her earpiece. Clara pretended to fix her hair, speaking softly. "Check, check. Reading you clearly." From the outside, the warehouse looked deserted. But she knew better. 3 FBI tactical teams were positioned strategically around the building. Agent Ramos led the team on the east side, hidden behind stacks of old shipping containers. 2 more teams covered the north and west exits. The south entrance, where Clara stood, was deliberately left open. It would be her way in, and hopefully Victor's too. She checked her watch. 8:45 p.m. Victor's message had been clear about the meeting time. 9 o'clock sharp. The tip from their informant suggested he was bringing potential buyers to meet 3 women he was holding. Clara's stomach churned at the thought. She'd seen too many cases like this, too many lives destroyed. But tonight, they had a chance to stop it. "Remember," Agent Ramos's voice came through her earpiece. "We need clear confirmation of trafficking before we move in. Get him to talk about the women." "Copy that," Clara whispered, adjusting the strap of her purse. Inside, her backup weapon lay hidden beneath some tissues and an old receipt. Her main service weapon was strapped to her ankle, concealed by her waitress uniform's long skirt. A car's headlights swept across the parking lot. Clara's heart rate picked up as a black SUV pulled in, moving slowly like a predator stalking its prey. It was too dark to see through the tinted windows, but she knew Victor's preferred vehicle. The SUV parked about 50 feet away. The driver's door opened, and Victor stepped out, looking immaculate in his dark suit. His smile, once charming to her, now seemed like a shark's all teeth and cold intent. "Clara," he called out, spreading his arms wide. "I knew you'd come. A desperate single mother like yourself, always looking for extra income." She forced herself to smile, channeling the persona of the struggling waitress she'd played for weeks. "You said the job paid well. I've got bills to pay." Victor walked closer, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. "Oh, it pays very well. But first, we need to discuss the nature of the work." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, playing up her nervousness. "What kind of work exactly?" "The kind that requires discretion." Victor stopped a few feet away, studying her face. "And loyalty. You understand, don't you? A woman in your position can't afford to be particular." Through her earpiece, she heard Agent Ramos whisper, "Keep him talking. I just need to know what I'm getting into," Clara said, letting a tremor enter her voice. "My son depends on me." Victor's smile widened. "Ah, yes, young Danny. How is he? Still enjoying baseball practice?" The casual mention of her son made Clara's blood run cold, but she kept her face neutral. Years of undercover work had taught her to channel fear into focus. "He's fine," she said curtly. "Let's talk about the job." "Of course." Victor gestured toward the warehouse. "I have some associates inside who'd like to meet you. They're always looking for fresh faces." As they walked toward the entrance, another vehicle pulled into the lot, a white panel van with no windows. 2 men got out, both wearing expensive suits that couldn't quite hide their muscular builds. "My business partners," Victor explained smoothly. "They're very interested in expanding our operation." Inside the warehouse, emergency lights cast a sickly yellow glow over stacked crates and rusted machinery. The air smelled of dust and decay. Clara's shoes echoed on the concrete floor as Victor led her deeper into the building. They rounded a corner, and Clara's heart clenched. 3 women sat huddled together on metal folding chairs. They looked young, probably early 20s, their faces marked by fear and exhaustion. One had a fresh bruise darkening her cheek, As you can see, Victor said, his voice taking on a business-like tone, we deal in specialized merchandise, high-end clients, exclusive arrangements. Clara fought to keep her voice steady. These women, they're not here willingly, are they? They're here because they know their place, Victor replied coldly. Just like you'll learn yours. The two men from the van moved to flank the women, their posture threatening. One of the women began to cry softly. And what exactly would my place be? Clara asked, needing him to be explicit. Victor stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming. You'll do as you're told, service the clients we choose, and in return, Danny will have a comfortable life, as long as you behave. There it was, the confession they needed. Clara's hand moved toward her purse. Now, she shouted. The warehouse erupted into chaos. FBI agents burst through multiple entrances, their tactical gear stark against the dim lighting. FBI, freeze! Hands where we can see them! The two men by the women reached for weapons, but Agent Ramos's team was faster. They went down hard, tackled to the concrete floor. Victor's face transformed from smooth confidence to pure rage. He spun away from Clara, shoving past a stack of crates. In the confusion, he slipped through a gap between two agents. Clara drew her weapon, but the angle was wrong, too many people in the way. She caught a glimpse of Victor's face as he reached the door. Their eyes met for a brief moment. His held a promise of vengeance that chilled her to the bone. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the warehouse. Around her, agents secured the scene. The three women clung to each other, crying with relief as female agents approached them gently, offering blankets and soft words of comfort. He got away, Clara reported into her wire, watching the door where Victor had vanished. But we got the others. The women are safe. Good work, Jenkins, Ramos replied. We'll find him. He can't hide forever. Clara holstered her weapon, then moved toward the rescued women. Their terror was giving way to hope, the first fragile moments of freedom taking root. She knew from experience that their journey to healing would be long, but at least now they had a chance. The warehouse filled with the controlled chaos of an active crime scene. Evidence technicians photographed everything, while agents led the handcuffed suspects to waiting vehicles. Emergency medical teams arrived to check on the women. Through it all, Clara couldn't shake the memory of Victor's final look. She'd seen that kind of hatred before. He wouldn't stop until he got revenge, and now he knew exactly who she was. In the dim light of the warehouse's makeshift command center, Clara knelt beside three women huddled together on metal folding chairs. Their eyes were wide with fear and exhaustion, shoulders hunched as if expecting another blow. The youngest couldn't have been more than 20, while the oldest reminded Clara of her neighbor back home. You're safe now, Clara said softly, accepting a blanket from Agent Ramos and draping it over the shoulders of the youngest woman, who was shivering. I'm Clara. Can you tell me your names? The oldest woman spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret. She reached for the hand of the woman next to her. This is Sarah, and that's Jenny. Jenny, the youngest, pulled the blanket tighter around herself. Are you really FBI? She asked, her voice trembling. You seem so normal. At the diner, Clara smiled gently. That was the idea, but yes, I'm an agent. She settled onto a chair across from them, keeping her body language open and unthreatening. Would you like some water? Something to eat? Sarah nodded, and Agent Ramos quickly brought over bottles of water and some granola bars from their supplies. Clara watched as the women's hands shook while opening the bottles, noticed how they took small, careful sips as if afraid it might be taken away. We thought no one would ever find us, Margaret said, tears welling in her eyes. Victor, he told us we were worthless, that no one would look for us. Clara's heart clenched. She reached out slowly, telegraphing her movement, and placed her hand over Margaret's. You were never worthless. Never. And we've been looking for you all along. Jenny started to cry, soft hiccuping sobs that seemed to come from deep inside. I have a little boy at home, she confessed. He's staying with my mom. Victor said if I didn't cooperate, they'd hurt him. Clara felt a fierce surge of maternal protectiveness. She thought of Danny, safe at home with Marie, and silently thanked God for putting her in a position to help these women. "Your son is safe," she assured Jenny, "and you're going to see him again very soon." Sarah, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "How did you know? How did you find us?" Clara considered her answer carefully. "Sometimes, God puts us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't understand why at first." She smiled softly. "I lost my husband 3 years ago. Ended up working at that diner to make ends meet. But maybe that wasn't just about survival. Maybe it was preparation for this moment to help you." The women listened intently as Clara explained the support services available to them: safe houses, counseling, witness protection if needed. With each detail, she saw hope flickering stronger in their eyes. "Will you stay with us?" Margaret asked, clutching Clara's hand tighter. "At least for a little while?" "Of course," Clara assured them. She settled in more comfortably, sharing stories about Danny, about her own struggles as a single mother. Gradually, the women began sharing too, memories of their families, their lives before Victor, their dreams for the future. Hours passed in that warehouse. Medical personnel came and went, taking vitals and offering care. Statements were recorded, evidence catalogued, but Clara stayed, a steady presence as the women processed their trauma and their freedom. Near midnight, Jenny finally fell asleep, her head resting against Margaret's shoulder. Sarah had curled up on a cot provided by the emergency response team. Margaret remained awake, staring at her hands. "You know what the worst part was?" Margaret whispered, "feeling like we didn't matter, like we were invisible." Clara leaned forward, her voice firm but gentle. "You matter. You always mattered. And your strength tonight, your courage in telling your stories, it's going to help us find others. You're not just survivors now, you're heroes." Margaret's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time she was smiling. "Thank you for seeing us." When the women were finally settled in their secure transport to the safe house, Clara watched the vehicles pull away, her heart full. Agent Ramos appeared at her side, offering a coffee. "Good work tonight, Jenkins," he said quietly. "You gave them something more valuable than freedom." Clara took a sip of coffee. "What's that?" "Hope," Ramos smiled. "Get home to your boy. You've earned it." The drive home was quiet, street lights casting intermittent shadows across her face. Clara felt bone-tired but peaceful, like she'd finally understood why God had led her down this path. The loss of her husband, the struggles of single motherhood, even the tedious hours at the diner, it had all prepared her for tonight. She pulled into her driveway just past 1 in the morning. Marie met her at the door, giving her a quick hug before heading home. Clara climbed the stairs quietly, peeking into Danny's room. He was sprawled across his bed, one arm hanging off the edge, comic books scattered around him. The sight of him, safe and innocent, made her heart swell. Clara crossed the room silently, gathering the comics and placing them on his nightstand. She bent down and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. Standing in his doorway, Clara allowed herself a smile of triumph. Tonight, 3 women were free. Tonight, she'd been exactly who she was meant to be, both agent and mother, protector and comforter. For the first time in years, she felt completely whole. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Clara whisked pancake batter in a large blue bowl. The familiar scent of coffee filled the air, and for the first time in weeks, she felt lighter. Last night's successful raid had given her renewed hope. 3 women were safe, and Victor's operation had taken a serious hit. She hummed an old hymn her mother used to sing, pouring perfect circles of batter onto the sizzling griddle. Danny would be up soon, and she wanted to surprise him with his favorite breakfast. After weeks of quick cereal and rushed mornings, they deserved this moment of peace. "Danny!" she called up the stairs. "Breakfast in 5 minutes, sweetie." No response came. But that wasn't unusual. Her son was never quick to wake, especially on school mornings. Clara smiled, remembering how he'd inherited his father's tendency to burrow under blankets until the last possible moment. The pancakes turned golden brown, and she flipped them with practiced ease. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Agent Ramos about paperwork from last night's operation. It could wait. This morning was for Danny. Clara arranged the pancakes on their favorite plates, the ones with silly cartoon characters that Danny insisted they keep even though he was too old for them now. She added a generous drizzle of maple syrup, forming a smiley face just like she used to do when he was younger. "Danny?" she called again, setting the plates on their small kitchen table. "Come on, sleepyhead. Your pancakes are getting cold." The doorbell chimed, its cheerful tone echoing through the house. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, assuming it was Marie. Her friend often stopped by on school mornings, especially after big operations, bringing coffee and concern in equal measure. "Just a minute," Clara called out, adjusting the temperature on the griddle. She grabbed Danny's plate, planning to take it up to him if he didn't appear soon. "Danny, I'm serious now. Time to get up." The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. "I'm coming, Marie." Clara headed for the front door. Danny's breakfast balanced carefully in one hand. "You know, you could just use your key." She opened the door, but no one was there. The morning air felt suddenly colder, and the quiet street seemed too still. Her eyes dropped to a piece of paper on the welcome mat, its edges weighed down by small stones. Clara's heart stopped as she read the carefully printed words, "I have your boy. Let's see what kind of agent you are now." The plate slipped from her trembling hands, crashing to the floor. Ceramic shards and syrup scattered across the hardwood as Clara bolted for the stairs. "Danny!" Her scream echoed through the empty house. "Danny!" She burst into his room, finding his bed empty, covers thrown back as if he'd been yanked away. His school backpack still sat by his desk, untouched. His favorite stuffed bear, the one he pretended he was too old for but still slept with, lay face down on the floor. "Danny!" Clara's voice broke, terror clawing at her throat as she screamed her son's name again and again. The morning sunlight that had seemed so warm just moments ago now felt harsh and mocking, illuminating the empty room where her son should have been sleeping safely. The pancakes she'd made with such joy lay scattered and broken at the front door, much like her sense of security had just shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Danny." She sank to her knees in his doorway, her son's name becoming a prayer, a plea, a desperate cry to the morning air that now held only silence. The smiley face she'd drawn in syrup on his pancakes was the last thing she'd made for him, and now it lay broken on the floor, an innocent symbol of motherly love twisted into something painful by Victor's cruel intervention. Her biggest fear, the one thing she'd prayed would never happen, had just become her reality. Her baby was gone. Clara's heart thundered in her chest as she raced up the stairs, taking them two at a time. "Danny!" Her voice cracked with desperation. "Danny! Honey! Answer Mommy!" The hallway stretched before her like a tunnel, each step feeling heavier than the last. She burst into his bedroom, where the morning sun cast cheerful patterns through his superhero curtains. His bed was still made from yesterday. He hadn't slept in it last night. The dinosaur pajamas he'd laid out were untouched on his pillow. "Please, God, no," she whispered, her hands trembling as she yanked open his closet doors. Empty. She dropped to her knees, checking under the bed. Nothing but dust bunnies and forgotten comic books. The bathroom was next. "Danny!" The echo of her voice bounced off the tiles, mocking her with silence. His blue toothbrush stood in its holder, waiting for a morning routine that wouldn't come. Clara stumbled back into the hallway, her FBI training warring with her maternal panic. Think clearly. Process the scene. But this wasn't just another case. This was her baby boy. She rushed down to the kitchen, where the pancakes still sizzled on the griddle, now burning black. The acrid smell filled the air as she yanked the plug from the wall. Her eyes darted to every corner, searching for signs of forced entry. The back door was still locked, the windows secured. How had Victor gotten to Danny? When? Her mind raced through the possibilities as she ran to the living room. Danny's backpack was gone from its usual spot by the couch. Had Victor taken him on his way to school? But school hadn't started yet. "Think, Clara, think," she commanded herself, but her thoughts scattered like marbles on a wooden floor. The morning paper lay unopened on the coffee table. Next to it, Danny's favorite red toy truck, the one he'd gotten from his father on his last birthday before the accident. Clara picked it up with trembling hands, running her fingers over the scratched paint and tiny dents. Danny took it everywhere, even slept with it sometimes. He would never have left it behind willingly. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the carpet, clutching the truck to her chest. A sob tore from her throat, raw and primal. Another followed, then another, until she could barely breathe through the tears. "I'm sorry, baby," she gasped between sobs. "I'm so sorry. Mommy should have protected you better." The truck's wheels dug into her palms as she gripped it tighter. She'd thought she could have it all. Be both the dedicated agent and the protective mother. But Victor had seen right through her, found her weakness, and now Danny was paying the price for her arrogance. Memories flooded her mind. Danny's laughter just yesterday morning, his sticky kiss after finishing his cereal, the way he'd waved goodbye before heading to Marie's house. Had Victor been watching even then, planning this moment? Clara's sobs gradually quieted, replaced by a hollow ache in her chest. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows across the living room floor. The house felt impossibly empty without Danny's presence. No cartoon sounds from the TV, no toy cars vrooming across the floor, no cheerful chatter about school or friends or the latest superhero movie. Her phone felt heavy in her pocket. She knew what she had to do, even though making this call meant admitting defeat. With shaking fingers, she pulled it out and dialed her handler's number. Agent Harrison picked up on the second ring. "Jenkins? What's wrong?" Clara tried to steady her voice, but it cracked anyway. "He has my son." She squeezed her eyes shut, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Victor has Danny." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "When?" "I don't know exactly. Sometime this morning. She swallowed hard, looking down at the toy truck still clutched in her hand. "He left a note. Said he wanted to see what kind of agent I really am. We'll mobilize immediately. I'll have teams." "No," Clara cut him off, her voice suddenly fierce despite the tears. "I don't care about the case anymore. I don't care about the operation or the trafficking ring or any of it. Just," her voice broke again, "just bring him back. Please. Bring my baby back." The toy truck's wheels had left red marks on her palm. She barely felt them. All she could think about was Danny, scared, alone, wondering why his mother hadn't protected him. The weight of her failure pressed down on her chest until she could hardly breathe. "I can't lose him too," she whispered into the phone. "Not after his father. I can't." She couldn't finish the sentence. The morning light suddenly seemed too bright, too cheerful for this nightmare she'd woken into. Somewhere out there, Victor had her son, her beautiful, brave, innocent little boy who still believed in superheroes and happy endings. The toy truck's red paint caught the sunlight, reminding her of Danny's bright smile when his father had given it to him. Clara pressed it closer to her heart, as if she could somehow transfer all her love and protection to Danny through this small piece of him she still held. "Whatever it takes," she told her handler, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever Victor wants. The case doesn't matter anymore. Nothing matters except getting Danny back." The FBI field office hummed with urgent activity. Agents rushed back and forth, their faces tight with concentration as they processed evidence from Victor's safe house. The walls were covered with maps, surveillance photos, and timelines. In the center of it all, Clara stood at a large table, her fingers tracing over documents with laser focus. Agent Ramos appeared at her side, his usual calm demeanor replaced by fierce determination. "We found more files in the basement," he said, placing a stack of papers in front of her. "Bank statements, real estate records, everything we've got on him." Clara barely nodded, her eyes never leaving the documents she was studying. Her FBI training kicked in automatically, helping her push down the crushing panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She had to think like an agent now, not just a terrified mother. "Here," she said, pointing to a map marked with red circles. "These markings, they're all around this area." Her finger landed on a spot in the rural outskirts, where dense forest surrounded a small lake. "Victor's careful. Too careful to leave this behind, unless he wanted us to find it," Ramos finished, leaning in closer. "Could be a trap." Clara's jaw tightened. "He's playing with us. With me." She spread out more papers, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "But look at these utility bills. Small amounts, but consistent payments to this address." She tapped the map again. A cabin in the woods. Perfect hiding spot. More agents gathered around the table as Clara pieced together the evidence. She could feel their eyes on her, some filled with sympathy, others with respect. They all knew what was at stake, not just another case, but a fellow agent's child. "The timeline matches," said a young analyst, pointing to a spreadsheet. "Electric usage spiked 3 months ago. Someone's been staying there." Clara closed her eyes for a moment, remembering Danny's smile that morning. His silly jokes over breakfast, the way he'd hugged her extra tight before heading to school. The memory sent a fresh wave of pain through her chest. "Ma'am?" A junior agent approached hesitantly, holding out a tablet. "We found security camera footage from the school. Shows a black van leaving the parking lot around the time Danny disappeared." Clara watched the grainy video, her breath catching as she recognized Victor behind the wheel. The timestamp matched perfectly. While she'd been making pancakes, thinking everything was finally going right, he'd been taking her son. "I want tactical ready in 30 minutes, she announced, her voice carrying across the room with authority. Heads turned, and she could see the surprise on some faces. "We're not waiting. Every minute we delay." "Clara," Ramos touched her arm gently. "Protocol says you can't be part of this operation. You're too close." She whirled to face him, eyes blazing. "Too close? My son is out there, Luis. My 10-year-old boy who's probably terrified right now, wondering where his mom is." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "I'm not sitting this one out. I can't." The room fell silent. Clara looked around at her colleagues, men and women who'd worked beside her for years, who knew her as both a dedicated agent and a devoted mother. She saw understanding dawn in their eyes. "I know what the rules say," she continued, softer now. "But this isn't just any case. Danny needs me, and I need to be there when we bring him home." Ramos studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll clear it with the director." He turned to the room. "All right, people, gear up. I want satellite images of that cabin, thermal scans, everything we've got. Full tactical team on standby." Clara felt a surge of gratitude for her partner's support. She grabbed her vest from her locker, checking her weapon with practiced efficiency. As she strapped on her gear, she thought of all the times she'd told Danny she'd always protect him. She wouldn't break that promise now. The tactical teams assembled in the parking lot, their black vehicles lined up and ready. Clara stood with them, listening to the final briefing. The plan was clear. Approach under cover of darkness, surround the cabin, extract Danny safely. Simple in theory, terrifying in reality. She touched the small cross hanging around her neck, a gift from her late husband. "Watch over our boy," she whispered. "Help me bring him home." The commander finished his briefing and looked at Clara expectantly. She stepped forward, her voice strong and clear, despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Victor Hale thinks he's got the upper hand." "He thinks targeting my son makes me weak." She paused, meeting each agent's eyes. "But he doesn't understand what a mother's love really means. We're bringing Danny home tonight." The teams moved toward their vehicles, determination visible in every face. Clara checked her gear one final time, her mind already racing ahead to the cabin, to Danny. No matter what Victor had planned, no matter what traps he might have set, nothing would stop her from reaching her son. Ramos appeared beside her, keys in hand. "Ready?" Clara nodded, her expression set with steel resolve. The time for fear and tears was over. Now was the time for action. She climbed into the SUV, her heart beating with a single purpose: find Danny, bring him home safe. The convoy of vehicles pulled out of the parking lot, lights flashing silently in the gathering dusk. Clara sat straight-backed in her seat, every muscle tense with anticipation. She was more than just an FBI agent now, more than just a mother. She was both, and that made her doubly dangerous to anyone who dared harm her child. Darkness crept over the forest like a heavy blanket, bringing with it a bone-chilling autumn wind that rustled through the trees. Clara crouched behind a thick oak, her bulletproof vest tight against her chest, her hand steady on her service weapon. 20 yards ahead, A rustic cabin sat nestled among the pines, its windows casting yellow squares of light into the gathering gloom. Agent Ramos's voice came soft through her earpiece. Teams in position. North, south, and west secured. Clara's eyes never left the cabin. Her heart thundered in her chest, but years of training kept her breathing even, her movements controlled. She watched as shadows moved behind the cabin's dirty windows, counting the shapes, tracking the movements. Visual confirmation on 2 hostiles, another agent whispered through the comm. Main room and kitchen. Then she saw him, Danny. Through a side window, illuminated by a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, her son sat tied to a wooden chair, his school backpack still hung from one shoulder, his favorite blue t-shirt now wrinkled and dirty. Even from this distance, she could see the tear tracks on his cheeks, the way his small shoulders trembled. Clara's fingers tightened on her weapon. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to rush forward, to burst through that door and grab her baby. But she forced herself to remain still, to think like an agent. Danny needed her to be both right now. Mother and protector. Target spotted. Ramos's voice crackled. Victor's armed. Shotgun. Possibly more weapons. The wind picked up, carrying the musty scent of fallen leaves and damp earth. Clara shifted her position slightly, getting a better angle on the window. Danny's head lifted, as if sensing her presence, and for a brief moment, their eyes met across the darkness. She saw his lips move, forming what looked like, "Mom." All teams, maintain positions, the tactical commander ordered through the comm. Waiting for negotiator arrival, 10 minutes out. Clara watched as Victor paced past the window, his shotgun cradled in his arms. His face looked different now. Gone was the charming smile he'd worn at the diner, replaced by something cold and calculating. He stopped near Danny, saying something they couldn't hear, and Clara saw her son flinch. "We need to move now," she whispered urgently into her comm. "He's escalating." "Hold position, Jenkins," the commander replied firmly. "We do this by the book." A twig snapped somewhere in the darkness, and Victor's head snapped toward the sound. His movement was jerky, paranoid. Clara recognized the signs of someone coming unhinged, and her worry deepened. The minutes crawled by like hours. Clara's legs burned from maintaining her crouched position, but she didn't dare move. Her eyes remained fixed on Danny, watching for any sign of increased danger. She could see him trying to be brave, sitting up straight despite his fear, just like she'd taught him. "Movement at the back door," an agent reported softly. "Second suspect appears to be checking the perimeter." Clara's mind raced through scenarios, analyzing angles and entry points. The cabin had 3 doors, front, back, and a side entrance near the kitchen. 2 small windows on each side, one larger picture window in front. The surrounding trees provided good cover for their team, but also limited their lines of sight. Victor appeared at the window again, this time standing directly behind Danny. He placed one hand on her son's shoulder, and Clara felt a surge of rage so powerful it nearly broke her control. She watched as he leaned down to speak into Danny's ear, saw her boy's face crumple in response. "Negotiator, 5 minutes out," the commander updated. A sudden crash from inside the cabin made everyone tense. Through the window, Clara saw Victor spin around, shouting at someone out of view. His gestures became more aggressive, the shotgun waving dangerously close to Danny. "He's losing it," Ramos muttered through the comm. "We need to—" The sharp crack of gunfire cut him off. Glass shattered as Victor fired through one of the windows, sending agents diving for cover. The forest erupted into chaos as more shots rang out from inside the cabin. Clara was already moving, staying low as she circled toward the back of the building. Her earpiece crackled with urgent voices. "Shots fired! Shots fired! All teams, hold positions." "Jenkins, what's your status?" She didn't respond. Through the chaos, she'd spotted a small cellar entrance, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. While Victor was distracted by the agents at the front, she, Army, crawled through the wet leaves toward the cellar doors. More gunfire peppered the night, accompanied by shouting from inside the cabin. Clara reached the cellar entrance, finding the padlock already broken. Carefully, silently, She pulled one door open just enough to slip inside. The cellar was pitch black and smelled of mold and rotting wood. Clara clicked on her tactical flashlight, keeping the beam low as she found the stairs. Each step could give her away, so she tested her weight carefully, moving like a shadow. At the top of the stairs, a door led into what she guessed was the cabin's kitchen. Light seeped through the cracks around the frame, and she could hear Victor's voice more clearly now, high-pitched and frantic. "Stay back. I'll kill him. I swear I'll kill him." Clara's hand found the door handle. She took one deep breath, centering herself. "I'm coming, baby," she whispered, and began to turn the handle. Sudden gunfire erupted from the cabin's front door, shattering the night silence. Bullets splintered tree bark and kicked up dirt as Victor fired wildly into the darkness. FBI agents dove for cover, returning controlled bursts of fire while shouting commands. Clara seized her moment. While Victor focused on the front, she slipped around to the cabin's rear, staying low and moving fast. The back door stood slightly ajar. The second suspect had left it open during his perimeter check. She could hear shouting from inside, Victor's angry voice rising above the chaos. Her training took over as she entered, gun raised, checking corners with swift precision. The kitchen was empty, dishes scattered across a rickety table. Through the doorway, she could see Danny still tied to the chair, his eyes wide with fear as bullets zinged through the front windows. "FBI, drop your weapons!" An agent's voice boomed from outside. More gunfire answered. Clara used the noise as cover, darting from the kitchen to a storage closet near Danny. Her son's head turned slightly. He'd sensed her movement. She pressed a finger to her lips, and Danny gave an almost imperceptible nod. Victor's footsteps pounded across the cabin's wooden floor as he ducked behind an overturned table. "Stay back!" he screamed. "I'll kill the kid!" Clara's blood ran cold, but her hands remained steady. She counted Victor's shots. 3, 4, 5. The shotgun would need reloading soon. Through the closet slats, she watched him fumble with shells, his movements growing more erratic. "Danny," she whispered, barely audible above the chaos. "When I move, you stay low. Understand?" Another tiny nod from her brave boy. The second suspect burst through the back door, bleeding from his arm. "They're everywhere!" he shouted to Victor. "We gotta—" A flashbang grenade sailed through a broken window, cutting him off. Clara squeezed her eyes shut just before it detonated with a deafening bang. Shouts and confusion filled the cabin. Now, Clara exploded from the closet, covering the short distance to Danny in 2 steps. Her knife made quick work of the ropes binding his hands while she kept her body between him and the gunfire. Danny's arms wrapped around her neck, his whole body trembling. "I knew you'd come, Mom," he whispered into her ear, his voice shaking but full of trust. "Always, baby," Clara breathed, checking him quickly for injuries. Besides rope burns on his wrists and a small cut above his eye, he seemed physically unharmed. "Stay behind me." More shots rang out. The second suspect had recovered from the flashbang and was firing toward the front door. Clara guided Danny toward the kitchen, keeping low. They'd almost reached the back door when a bullet splintered the doorframe, inches from their heads. Clara shoved Danny behind the solid protection of the refrigerator, spinning to face the threat. Victor stood in the kitchen doorway, his shotgun discarded, now holding a pistol. His face was a mask of rage and desperation. "You ruined everything," he snarled, advancing slowly. "All my plans, my operation, destroyed by a single mother playing cop." Clara raised her weapon, positioning herself firmly between Victor and the refrigerator where Danny huddled. Her aim was rock steady, fueled by a mother's protective fury. She could hear Danny's rapid breathing behind her, feel the weight of his trust, his safety resting entirely in her hands. "It's over, Victor," she said, her voice hard as steel. "Drop the gun." Victor's eyes darted between Clara and the refrigerator, calculating. His finger tightened on the trigger. "You won't risk shooting with your boy so close," he sneered. "Put the gun down, Clara. Let's talk about this." But Clara didn't move. Her stance remained solid, her aim unwavering. Gone was any trace of the timid waitress Victor thought he'd found. In her place stood a warrior, a protector, an avenging mother with nothing left to fear. "Last chance," she warned as federal agents began moving in behind Victor. "Drop it." Victor's face twisted with hatred as he leveled his pistol at Clara's chest. Clara stood in the dim cabin, her FBI-issue weapon trained steadily on Victor. Moonlight filtered through dirty windows, casting strange shadows across the wooden floor. Her heart pounded, but her hands remained perfectly still, years of training taking over despite her fear for Danny. Victor's lips curved into that same charming smile he'd worn at the diner, but now it held nothing but malice. He kept his gun pointed at Danny, who sat trembling in the wooden chair, rope binding his small wrists. "You know what I see, Clara?" Victor's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I see another desperate single mom trying to play hero. They're all the same, so easy to break." Clara didn't respond. She focused on her breathing, just like she'd learned at Quantico. In, out, steady. Her eyes never left Victor's trigger finger. "How many nights did you cry yourself to sleep at that pitiful diner job?" Victor continued, taking a step closer. "Pretending to be strong for your boy while barely making ends meet? Women like you are all so predictable." Danny whimpered softly, and Clara felt a surge of protective rage. But she kept her voice level, professional. "Drop your weapon, Victor. It's over." He laughed. A harsh, ugly sound that echoed off the cabin walls. "Over? I don't think so. See, I've dealt with law enforcement before." But they were all men, trained to think with their heads. His eyes gleamed. You're thinking with your heart right now, looking at your precious boy, imagining what might happen if you make one wrong move." Clara's jaw tightened. Outside, she could hear the FBI tactical team moving into position. She just needed to keep him talking, keep him focused on her. "You're wrong about me," she said quietly. "About all of us. Those women you targeted? They weren't desperate. They were survivors. Strong enough to keep going despite everything life threw at them." Victor's smile faltered slightly. "Strong?" He spat the word. "They were weak, lonely, pathetic, just like you pretended to be, serving coffee with that sad little smile." "Mom?" Danny's voice was small but clear. "Mom, don't listen to him. You're the strongest person I know." Victor's face twisted with rage. He stepped closer to Danny, pressing the gun against the boy's temple. "Shut up, kid. Your mom's about to learn." But that was his mistake. In his anger, Victor's attention had shifted just slightly away from Clara. In that split second, she saw what he couldn't: the flaw in his stance, the microsecond delay in his trigger grip. Clara fired once, precisely. The bullet struck Victor's right shoulder, his shooting arm. He screamed, his weapon clattering to the floor as he stumbled backward. Before he could recover, she crossed the room in 3 rapid strides, kicking his gun away and delivering a swift strike to the back of his knee. Victor collapsed, cursing. "FBI, nobody move." The cabin door burst open as Agent Ramos led the tactical team inside, weapons raised. But Clara was already kneeling beside Danny's chair, her trembling fingers working to untie the ropes. "I knew you'd come," Danny whispered as the bonds fell away. "I kept telling him my mom was different, special." Clara pulled him into her arms, feeling his small body shake with relieved sobs. She held him tight, one hand stroking his hair, while the other kept her weapon trained on Victor until Ramos secured him in handcuffs. "You okay, Jenkins?" Ramos asked, concern evident in his voice as he roughly hauled Victor to his feet. Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak yet. She just held Danny closer, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo, feeling his heart beat against hers. Around them, the cabin filled with agents, their voices professional and controlled as they secured the scene. Victor spat blood from his split lip, glaring at Clara with pure hatred. "You think this changes anything? There will always be women like you, alone, desperate." "No," Clara cut him off, her voice steady and clear. "There will always be women like me, strong enough to stop men like you." She turned away from him, focusing entirely on Danny. "Let's go home, sweetheart. It's over." Ramos and his team led Victor out into the night, where red and blue lights flashed through the trees. Clara could hear other agents calling in their status, the familiar routine of wrapping up an operation. But for now, she just sat on the cabin floor, holding her son, whispering soft words of comfort as backup agents moved efficiently around them. Danny's fingers clutched her jacket. "I was scared," he admitted quietly. "But I kept remembering what you always say about being brave." Clara wiped tears from his cheeks with gentle fingers. "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared," she reminded him. "It means doing what's right even when you are scared. And you were so brave tonight, Danny, so brave." "Just like you, Mom," he said, managing a shaky smile. "Just like you." Through the cabin's dirty windows, Clara could see the first hints of dawn lightening the sky. She held Danny close, feeling the weight of her badge against her hip, knowing that for the first time since losing her husband, she didn't feel torn between her two callings, agent and mother. In this moment, they were one and the same, protecting those who needed protection, being strong for those who needed strength. The backup agents moved purposefully through the cabin, documenting evidence and securing the scene. But Clara remained still, giving Danny the time he needed to feel safe again in her arms. She knew there would be debriefings, paperwork, and counseling sessions ahead. But right now, none of that mattered. "Agent Jenkins?" One of the tactical team members approached quietly. "Medical team's ready to check him over whenever you're ready." Clara nodded, but didn't move just yet. She kept holding Danny, feeling his breathing slowly steady against her chest. In the distance, she could hear Victor being read his rights as they loaded him into a transport vehicle. His taunts about desperate women echoed in her mind, but they held no power now. He had never understood the true strength of a mother's love, the kind of love that could be both fierce and gentle, both protective and nurturing. "Mom?" Danny's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "Can we get pancakes after?" A small laugh escaped her, thick with emotion. "Yeah, baby, we can get pancakes after." Around them, the cabin continued to buzz with activity as backup agents processed the scene, their flashlight beams cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. But Clara and Danny remained in their own quiet bubble, holding on to each other, both understanding that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply hold on to the ones you love. Red and blue lights flashed across the dark forest clearing, illuminating the scene outside the cabin in rhythmic pulses. FBI vehicles and ambulances crowded the narrow dirt road, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine needles and recent gunfire. Clara sat on the back step of an ambulance, her arms wrapped tightly around Danny. He hadn't let go of her since they'd emerged from the cabin, and she had no intention of releasing him either. A paramedic had draped an orange shock blanket around their shoulders, but Clara barely noticed it. All that mattered was the solid warmth of her son pressed against her side, his chest rising and falling with each breath, alive, safe, whole. "Mom?" Danny's voice was small but steady. "I wasn't scared. I knew you'd come." Clara pressed her lips to the top of his head, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. "Of course I came, baby. I'll always come for you." Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the fear she'd been holding back. Agent Ramos approached them, his normally neat appearance disheveled from the operation. "Clara, the transport team is ready to move hail." He glanced at Danny with gentle eyes. "You did good, kid. You're one brave little man." Danny managed a weak smile, pressing closer to his mother. Clara watched as two agents led Victor toward a waiting vehicle, his hands cuffed behind his back. Even in defeat, he carried himself with that same arrogant posture. But now, in the harsh glare of the emergency lights, he looked smaller somehow. Less menacing, just a man who'd made terrible choices. A commotion near one of the other ambulances drew Clara's attention. The women they'd rescued from Victor's trafficking ring were huddled together, receiving medical attention. One of them, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, broke away from the group and approached Clara. "Agent Jenkins?" Her voice trembled. We wanted to thank you." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she spoke. "Nobody believed us. Nobody helped us. But you did." The other women joined her, forming a small circle around Clara and Danny. Their faces showed exhaustion and trauma, but something else too. relief, hope, the first fragile beginnings of healing. One by one, they reached out to touch Clara's shoulder or hand, murmuring quiet thanks. "You're safe now," Clara assured them, her own eyes growing moist. "All of you are safe." Danny looked up at the women, then back at his mother. "My mom's a hero," he said simply, with complete conviction. A gentle breeze stirred through the trees as the sky began to lighten. The first hints of dawn painted the eastern horizon in soft purple and pink. Clara watched as the women were guided toward waiting vehicles that would take them to a secure facility. Somewhere, they could begin their recovery, surrounded by counselors and support staff. Agent Ramos returned, this time with coffee in a paper cup. He handed it to Clara, who accepted it gratefully. "The brass is impressed," he said, settling onto the ambulance step beside them. "This bust will shut down one of the largest trafficking operations in 3 states. Clara nodded, but her focus remained on Danny. "I couldn't have done it without my partner here," she said, squeezing her son's shoulder. "He was so brave, just like Dad would have been," Danny whispered. The words caught Clara off guard. She thought of her late husband, of his unwavering sense of justice, his gentle strength. "Yes," she managed, "just like Dad." More vehicles arrived, social workers, additional medical staff, crime scene technicians, the organized chaos of a major operation winding down. Clara recognized the familiar pattern, but this time it felt different. This time it was deeply personal. A female agent approached with fresh clothes for Danny. Someone had thought to bring his spare outfit from their go-bag in Clara's car. Such a small gesture, but it nearly brought Clara to tears again. These people weren't just her colleagues. They were family who had come together to protect one of their own. As the sky continued to brighten, Clara helped Danny change behind the ambulance door. His movements were stiff from being tied up, but he insisted on doing most of it himself. "I'm okay, Mom," he kept saying, clearly trying to be strong for her sake. The social worker wanted to do a preliminary interview with Danny, but Clara insisted it could wait until they'd both had some rest. No one argued with her. They'd all seen the fierce determination in her eyes when she'd stormed that cabin, the perfect blend of FBI agent and mother bear. Victor's transport vehicle pulled away, heading toward the federal detention center where he would await trial. Clara watched it disappear down the dirt road, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The man who had threatened her family, who had caused so much pain to so many women, was finally facing justice. The first real rays of sunlight began to pierce through the tree branches, casting long shadows across the clearing. Clara stood, helping Danny to his feet. They walked a few steps away from the bustle of the crime scene, facing east toward the rising sun. The morning light painted Danny's face in warm gold, highlighting how much he looked like his father. But there was something new in his expression, too. A quiet strength that was all his own. Clara felt fierce pride surge through her chest. Behind them, she could hear Ramos coordinating with the evidence response team. The rescued women's voices drifted over, stronger now, sharing their stories with gentle-voiced counselors. The worst was over. Healing could begin. Clara took a deep breath of the morning air, feeling its crisp cleanness fill her lungs. Danny's hand found hers, squeezing tight. Together, they watched the sun climb higher, its light chasing away the last shadows of night. "Justice and mercy always win," Clara whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the gentle morning breeze. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Clara's front lawn as she pulled into her driveway. Her small white house had never looked more welcoming. Flower bouquets and covered dishes already crowded her front porch. News traveled fast in their tight-knit community. Danny's hand stayed firmly clasped in hers as they walked up the path. Before Clara could reach for her keys, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, hurried over from next door, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Oh, thank the Lord." Mrs. Peterson wrapped them both in a warm embrace that smelled of lavender and fresh-baked bread. "We've all been praying non-stop since we heard." Clara's eyes welled up at the genuine concern in her neighbor's voice. "Thank you, Martha." Those prayers meant everything. More neighbors appeared, as if summoned by an invisible signal. Sarah from across the street brought her famous chicken casserole. The Martinez family carried containers of homemade tamales. Even gruff Mr. Casserole Johnson from 3 doors down showed up with a grocery bag full of Danny's favorite snacks. "The whole neighborhood's been worried sick," Sarah said, giving Danny a gentle pat on the shoulder. "We've got enough food here to feed you for weeks." Clara's living room slowly filled with familiar faces. Church members, school parents, and neighbors she'd barely had time to talk to before. They moved furniture, set up folding tables, and transformed her home into an impromptu gathering space, the air filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals and the gentle murmur of concerned voices. Marie arrived with tears in her eyes, hugging Clara fiercely. "Don't you ever scare me like that again," she whispered, then pulled back to look at Danny. "And you, young man, you're the bravest kid I know." Danny managed a small smile, the first Clara had seen since their ordeal. He hadn't left her side, but she noticed him relaxing slightly as familiar faces surrounded them with love and support. Pastor Jim arrived with his wife, carrying a basket of fresh rolls and scripture verses written on small cards. He placed a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder. "The Lord protected you both," he said softly. "And He used you to protect others. That's no small thing." Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She'd kept so many secrets from these people. Her real job, the dangers she faced. Yet, here they were, showing up without question when she needed them most. Mrs. Peterson bustled around the kitchen, organizing the food and sending people home with serving dishes. "Now, dear," she said to Clara, "you just sit down and let us take care of everything." Clara sank onto her familiar couch, Danny tucked against her side. She watched as her community moved around her home with purpose and love, washing dishes, arranging flowers, making sure everyone had enough to eat. The weight of her double life felt lighter somehow, surrounded by such genuine care. "Mom," Danny whispered. "Everyone came." "They did, sweetheart." Clara kissed the top of his head. "That's what community means, showing up for each other." As the afternoon light began to fade, people gradually said their goodbyes. Each person hugged Clara and Danny, promising prayers and future meals. Mrs. Peterson was the last to leave, insisting on putting every last dish away and writing detailed reheating instructions for each casserole. Finally, Clara and Danny were alone in their quiet house. The room still held the warmth of so many caring hearts, along with the lingering sense of comfort food and fresh flowers. Clara ran a bath for Danny, adding extra bubbles, his favorite. While he bathed, she changed his sheets to the soft flannel ones he loved best. Small things, mother things, that helped restore a sense of normalcy. After his bath, Danny came padding into her room in his Star Wars pajamas, his hair still damp. Clara sat on her bed, arms open, and he crawled right in like he used to when he was smaller. "Mom?" His voice was quiet but steady. "Do you think Dad would be proud of how we handled everything?" Clara's heart squeezed in her chest. She pulled Danny closer, breathing in the clean smell of his shampoo, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers. In that moment, she saw clearly how much strength her little boy had shown, how much courage they'd both found when they needed it most. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "but I think I'm even prouder." The marble halls of the courthouse echoed with Clara's steady footsteps as she made her way to the witness stand. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long rectangles of warmth across the polished floor. She smoothed her navy blazer, touching the small cross pendant at her neck, a gift from Danny for Mother's Day. "Please, state your name for the record," the court clerk instructed. "Special Agent Clara Jenkins, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Her voice carried clearly through the hushed courtroom. She could feel Victor's cold stare from the defendant's table, but she didn't flinch. Those eyes no longer held any power over her. As the prosecutor walked her through her testimony, Clara's mind drifted to the women who had already taken the stand. Their courage had moved her to tears. Young mothers, sisters, daughters who had survived Victor's cruelty. Some had struggled to speak above a whisper. Others had broken down, but each had faced him with remarkable strength. "Agent Jenkins, please tell the court about your undercover operation at the diner." Clara described those long nights of serving coffee, of playing the part of a struggling single mother while gathering evidence. She explained how Victor had targeted vulnerable women, exploiting their loneliness and desperation. Her voice grew stronger as she detailed the sting operation that led to the rescue of 3 trafficking victims. "And were you afraid, Agent Jenkins?" the prosecutor asked. Clara paused, considering. "I was afraid for my son," she admitted. "But I knew God had placed me there for a reason. Those women needed someone to fight for them." In the gallery she spotted some of the rescued women: Maria, who had found work as a teacher's aide; Sarah, who was reuniting with her children; Rebecca, who had started a support group for survivors. Their presence filled her with quiet pride. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive, trying to paint her as reckless for involving her son in an undercover operation. Clara remained composed, explaining her security measures and backup plans. When he pressed about her emotional state after losing her husband, she met his gaze steadily. "My loss taught me that strength comes in many forms," she said. "Sometimes it looks like a single mother working late shifts. Sometimes it looks like a woman finding the courage to testify against her abuser." During the lunch recess, Clara sat alone in the courthouse garden, watching pigeons scatter breadcrumbs. Agent Ramos found her there, offering a paper cup of coffee. "You did well in there," he said, settling beside her on the bench. The jury was hanging on every word. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I keep thinking about that night at the cabin. How close we came to—" She stopped, unable to finish the thought. "But we didn't," Ramos reminded her gently. "You trusted your training and your instincts. You saved Danny, and you helped bring down an entire trafficking ring." She nodded, watching sunlight dance through the trees. The fear of that night still visited her dreams sometimes, but it was growing fainter. What remained was a deeper understanding of God's purpose for her life. Back in the courtroom, Clara listened as the prosecution presented their closing arguments. They displayed photos of the safe house where Victor had held his victims, the fake passports, the ledgers tracking his cruel commerce in human lives. Each piece of evidence represented countless hours of investigative work, countless prayers whispered in the dark. When the jury filed back in after deliberations, Clara held her breath. The forewoman stood, paper trembling slightly in her hands. "On all counts, we find the defendant guilty." A collective exhale rippled through the courtroom. Clara closed her eyes briefly in gratitude. Behind her, she heard soft crying, tears of relief, of vindication, of healing beginning. Victor showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs. Clara watched him go, feeling not triumph but a profound sense of peace. Justice had been served, but more importantly, lives had been changed. Women who had lost hope were finding their way back to light. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered with microphones and cameras. Clara slipped past them, heading for her car. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks as she drove home, her heart lighter with each mile. As she turned onto her street, she saw Danny sitting on their front porch steps, homework spread around him. He jumped up at the sight of her car, his face breaking into a wide smile that reminded her so much of his father. Clara parked and walked up the path, breathing in the sweet scent of the roses she and Danny had planted together. From the nearby church, bells began to ring, their clear tones carrying on the evening breeze. "How did it go?" Danny asked, gathering his books. Clara wrapped an arm around his shoulders, guiding him toward their front door. Her badge caught the last rays of sunlight, glinting like a promise kept. Inside, dinner was waiting. Beyond their threshold lay all the ordinary moments that made up a life: homework to check, prayers to say, dreams to nurture. She knew with certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Her faith had carried her through darkness into light. Her mission, both as an agent and a mother, was clearer than ever: to protect, to serve, to love with fierce determination. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Clara Jenkins, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.